The busy dinner rush at Bellini's was in full swing. The clinking of expensive wine glasses mixed with the murmur of important conversations as the city's richest and most powerful people enjoyed their evening meals. Through it all, Maria moved quickly between tables, her black uniform blending into the background as she refilled water glasses and delivered steaming plates of pasta. "Table 12 needs more bread," another waitress whispered as they passed each other in the narrow hallway behind the kitchen. Maria nodded and grabbed a fresh basket. She had been on her feet for nearly 10 hours already. Her first shift had started at lunch, and now she was halfway through dinner service with hours still to go. Her legs ached, but she couldn't afford to turn down the double shift. Not with rent due next week and her night-class tuition payment coming up. As she approached table 12, 4 businessmen in suits worth more than she made in 3 months, Maria put on her practiced smile. These people didn't see her, not really. To them, she was just hands that delivered food, a voice that took orders. Sometimes she wondered if they would even recognize her face if they passed her on the street. "Your bread, gentlemen," she said, placing the basket down carefully between their animated discussion about some investment opportunity. One man briefly nodded without looking up. Maria slipped away, used to being invisible. At least they were. Mr. Bellini's panic spread through the restaurant like wildfire. The staff exchanged worried glances as they hurried between tables. The annual charity gala wasn't just another busy night, it was the event of the season. Movie producers, famous musicians, and worthy donors would soon fill every table in the place. "Did you hear?" Lisa whispered to Maria as they both grabbed orders from the kitchen window. "Henry's got the flu. Can't even get out of bed." Maria nodded, balancing 3 plates of steaming risotto along her arm. "Mr. Bellini looks like he's about to explode. You know who's coming tonight, right? That big-shot music producer, Eleanor Winters. And the mayor. And that famous violin player from the symphony." Maria felt a tiny flutter in her stomach at the mention of Eleanor Winters. Everyone in the music world knew that name. Before her life had taken its sharp turn, Maria had dreamed of playing for someone like Eleanor, of being discovered and nurtured by a true industry legend. "Well, they'll have to enjoy their dinner without music," Maria said, pushing those thoughts away. She had a job to do. As the evening wore on, the restaurant transformed. Staff brought out the special linens and the crystal glasses that were only used for important events. The lighting was dimmed just so, and fresh flowers appeared on every table. By 7 o'clock, the place was unrecognizable and absolutely packed. Maria had never seen so many expensive outfits and jewelry in one room. Women in designer dresses that probably cost more than her yearly rent chatted with men in perfectly tailored suits. The air smelled of expensive perfume and the special truffle dishes the chef had prepared just for tonight. Through it all, Mr. Bellini continued making frantic phone calls. Maria overheard snippets as she passed by his office between serving tables. "Triple your usual rate, just for 2 hours. I don't care if you've never played here before." By 8 o'clock, when the first course was being served to the charity gala guests, Mr. Bellini looked defeated. Maria watched him stare at the empty piano in the corner of the room. It stood there like a silent accusation, its lid open and waiting for hands that wouldn't come. "You promised live music," a woman in a red dress complained loudly to Mr. Bellini as Maria served her table. The invitation specifically mentioned a piano performance during dinner. "I understand, Mrs. Chen," Mr. Bellini said, his smile strained. "We had an unfortunate last-minute cancellation. I've been trying to find a replacement all day." "Well, it's disappointing," the woman sniffed. "The atmosphere is just not the same without music." Maria finished setting down the plates and slipped away, but not before she caught the look of genuine distress on her boss's face. Mr. Bellini had worked so hard to build this restaurant's reputation. Nights like this could make or break a place like Bellini's. As she headed back to the kitchen, Maria passed the piano again. Without thinking, she slowed down, her eyes drawn to the keys. She could almost hear the music that should be filling the room, something gentle but sophisticated. Debussy, perhaps. Clair de Lune would be perfect for this crowd. Her fingers tingled with memory. How long had it been since she'd really played? Not just tapping out simple tunes on the electronic keyboard her roommate had bought from a thrift store, but really playing a proper piano. "Maria, table 15 needs their wine." The head waiter's voice snapped her back to reality. For the next hour, Maria moved through the dining room like a shadow, bringing food and clearing plates. But something had awakened inside her. Each time she passed the piano, she felt it calling to her. And each time she saw Mr. Bellini's worried face as he tried to smooth over complaints about the missing music, she felt a tug of empathy. During a brief lull, Maria found herself standing by the kitchen doors, watching the room. The conversations were growing louder as wine flowed freely. Several important-looking people at the center table were checking their watches and whispering to each other. A tall man in an expensive suit was taking pictures of the food with his phone, probably for social media. And over by the windows, Eleanor Winters herself sat with 3 other people, deep in conversation. "It's a disaster," Mr. Bellini muttered, suddenly appearing beside Maria. He wasn't talking to her specifically, just venting his frustration to the air. The biggest night of the year, and no music. Maria took a deep breath. Before she could think better of it, she heard herself say, "Mr. Bellini, I might be able to help." Mr. Bellini stared at Maria with wide eyes, as if only now actually seeing her. You can play piano." His voice was a mixture of hope and disbelief. Maria nodded, her heart racing. Why had she spoken up? 5 years without touching a real piano. 5 years of pushing music aside to focus on survival. "I used to play," she said quietly, "before I started working here." Mr. Bellini's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean used to? Can you play well enough for this crowd? These people," he gestured toward the dining room full of wealthy guests, "these are not kind critics." Maria swallowed hard. "I studied at Juilliard for a semester before I had to drop out." The restaurant owner's eyebrows shot up. "Juilliard?" Just then, a waiter rushed over. "Mr. Bellini, the Chen party is asking to speak to you again. They're threatening to leave." Mr. Bellini looked from the waiter to Maria, making a quick decision. "Ok, Maria, you can try. Just a few simple pieces while I keep looking for a professional. Something gentle, background music, nothing too ambitious." He was already walking away, adding over his shoulder, "If it doesn't work out, just stop and go back to serving." Maria stood frozen for a moment. What had she just gotten herself into? 5 years. 5 years since she performed for anyone. And now she was going to play for a room full of the most influential people in the city. "You're doing it." Lisa appeared at her side, eyes wide with surprise. "I didn't know you played piano." "I don't anymore. Not really." Maria's hands were trembling slightly. "But Mr. Bellini seems desperate." Lisa squeezed her arm. "Want me to cover your tables?" Maria nodded gratefully. "Just for a little while. I'm sure Mr. Bellini will find someone real soon." She made her way to the employee bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. Her black waitress uniform was plain but neat. She splashed water on her face and took a deep breath. She could do this. Just a few simple tunes, nothing fancy. As she walked through the dining room toward the piano, a few guests glanced at her curiously. Most didn't notice her at all. She was just another server moving through the space. Only when she sat down at the piano bench did heads begin to turn. The beautiful Steinway waited, its black and white keys like an old friend she hadn't seen in years. Maria placed her hands gently on the keys but didn't press down yet. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. What should she play? Something simple, Mr. Bellini had said. Background music. She could do Für Elise or a simple Mozart piece. But as her fingers rested on the cool ivory, what came to mind was Chopin, her father's favorite. The piece she had played the last time he heard her perform, 2 months before he died. At a nearby table, someone whispered loudly, "Is the waitress sitting at the piano?" Another voice answered, "Maybe she's cleaning it." Maria felt her cheeks grow hot. She almost stood up to leave, to escape back to the kitchen where she belonged. But then, across the room, she spotted Eleanor Winters. The famous producer was mid-conversation, gesturing with her hands, unaware of Maria's presence. 5 years ago, Maria would have given anything for the chance to play for someone like Eleanor Winters, and now here she was, by some strange twist of fate, with exactly that opportunity. Before she could lose her courage, Maria began to play. She started softly with the opening notes of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor. Her fingers were stiff at first, uncertain after so long away from the keys. A wrong note here, a hesitation there. But after a few measures, something inside her woke up. A muscle memory that ran deeper than conscious thought. The conversations around her didn't stop immediately. No one gasped or turned to stare. But slowly, as the gentle opening gave way to more complex passages, the noise level in the room began to drop. Maria kept her eyes on the keys, too nervous to look up. She let herself feel the music, the way her teacher had taught her long ago. Don't just play the notes, Ms. Rodriguez had always said. Tell the story the composer was trying to tell. The story in Chopin's Ballade was one of beauty and heartbreak, of longing for home and acceptance of loss. All things Maria understood too well. As she played, her hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. That music had been her first language, her truest voice. She didn't notice when the first table fell completely silent. She didn't see when Eleanor Winters stopped mid-sentence and turned toward the piano. She was lost in the music now, her heart pounding as her fingers flew across the keys. For the first time in 5 years, Maria was not a waitress. She was a musician, and every eye in the room was beginning to turn her way. The music flowed from Maria's fingers like water breaking through a dam. Years of holding back, of telling herself she wasn't a musician anymore, melted away with each passing measure. The Chopin piece built in intensity, and Maria moved with it, her body swaying slightly as the melody rose and fell. By the middle section of the piece, the dining room had fallen almost completely silent. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the kitchen staff had stopped to listen, peeking through the swinging doors with wide eyes. Maria didn't notice any of it. She was lost in the music, in a world where her father was still alive and proud, where her dreams hadn't been put on a shelf to gather dust. Her fingers found the keys without conscious thought, muscle memory taking over where practice had left off. A waiter dropped a glass somewhere in the back of the room, and the sound of it shattering seemed to emphasize the hush that had fallen over the crowd rather than break it. Mr. Bellini stood near the kitchen, his mouth slightly open, watching as his quiet, hard-working waitress transformed before his eyes. He had heard many pianists play in his restaurant over the years, but there was something different about Maria's performance, a raw emotion that technical training alone couldn't create. At a table near the windows, Eleanor Winters put down her wine glass slowly. The famous producer leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Maria with the intensity of someone who had just discovered a rare jewel in the most unexpected place. The people at her table tried to continue their conversation, but she waved them quiet with an impatient hand, never taking her eyes off the piano. As the piece reached its most challenging section, Maria's confidence grew. Her earlier hesitations vanished as she surrendered completely to the music. She still hadn't looked up, hadn't seen the effect she was having on the room. All she knew was the feeling of coming home after a long journey, of finding a piece of herself she thought was lost forever. The final notes of the ballade rang out, clear and haunting in the silence of the room. For one breathless moment after the music stopped, no one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the entire restaurant was under a spell that no one wanted to break. And then the applause began. It started with a single person, a gray-haired man at a corner table who stood up, his napkin falling unnoticed to the floor as he clapped with genuine enthusiasm. Others joined quickly, the applause spreading like wildfire until the whole room was filled with the sound. Several people stood, and then more, until nearly everyone was on their feet. Only then did Maria look up, her cheeks flushed with the effort of playing. Her eyes widened as she took in the standing ovation. These were people who had looked through her for months, who had never seen past her uniform to the person underneath. Now they were looking at her, really seeing her, for the first time. "Encore!" Someone called from the back of the room. "Play another," came another voice. Maria's eyes found Mr. Bellini, who was clapping as loudly as anyone. He nodded at her, his earlier skepticism completely gone, replaced by something that looked like pride. With shaking hands, Maria turned back to the piano. What should she play next? Something told her this wasn't the time for a quiet background piece. These people wanted to hear what she could really do. Her fingers found the keys again, and this time she chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, a piece that started quietly but built to a thundering, passionate climax. It was a piece that demanded everything from a pianist: technical skill, emotional depth, physical stamina. As she began to play, Maria felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. Whatever happened after tonight, whether this led anywhere or not, she was playing again. The thing she loved most in the world, the thing that made her feel most alive, was hers again for this moment. Across the room, Elena Winters took out her phone and began to record. Her dinner companions exchanged knowing looks. They had seen that expression on her face before, the look she got when she found something special, something worth fighting for. Maria played on, unaware that her life was about to change forever. For now, there was only the music, the keys beneath her fingers, and the rare, beautiful feeling of being exactly where she was meant to be. The second piece ended with even more thunderous applause than the first. Maria stood from the piano bench and gave a small, awkward bow, unsure of the proper protocol. She hadn't performed formally in so long. Should she say something? Thank them? She simply smiled, her cheeks flushed with excitement and embarrassment. She turned to head back to the kitchen, thinking her moment in the spotlight was over. But before she could take more than a few steps, guests began to stop her. "That was incredible," said a woman wearing more diamonds than Maria had ever seen in person. "Simply breathtaking." "Are you a professional?" asked another guest. "Do you have albums we can buy?" Maria shook her head, stunned by the attention. "No, I work here," she said, gesturing to her waitress uniform. "Not for long, I suspect," said a man in an expensive suit, chuckling as he patted her shoulder. The crowd around her grew, with guests pressing business cards into her hands and asking questions she could barely process. After months of being practically invisible in this same room, the sudden visibility was overwhelming. Maria looked around desperately for a familiar face, feeling slightly panicked by the crush of attention. Mr. Bellini appeared at her side, gently guiding her away from the crowd. "Let's give our pianist some space," he announced to the guests with a practiced smile. "She'll play another set later." He led Maria to a quiet corner near his office. "That was unexpected," he said, his voice filled with genuine wonder. "Why didn't you ever tell me you could play like that?" Maria shrugged, looking down at her hands. "You never asked. And honestly, I haven't played seriously in years." "Years?" Mr. Bellini looked shocked. "You play like that without practice? Dio mio, what would you sound like with practice?" Before Maria could answer, Lisa rushed over, her eyes wide with excitement. "Maria, Elena Winters wants to speak with you." "Eleanor Winters?" She grabbed Maria's arm, practically bouncing with excitement. "Do you know who she is?" Of course Maria knew. Everyone in the music world knew Eleanor Winters. The producer had discovered some of the biggest classical talents of the past 20 years. Having her attention was like winning the lottery for a musician. "She's at table 7, Lisa continued. "She asked specifically for you to come over when you're ready." Maria felt her heart drop to her stomach. This was really happening. She looked down at her plain black uniform, suddenly conscious of the small stain on the sleeve from a spilled sauce earlier in the evening. "Go," Mr. Bellini said gently. "This is important. I'll cover for you." Maria took a deep breath and walked across the dining room toward table 7. People watched her pass, whispering to each other. A few took pictures with their phones. One woman even reached out to touch her arm as she passed, as if checking that she was real. Eleanor Winters sat waiting, her silver hair styled in an elegant bob, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Unlike many of the other guests who were dressed in flashy outfits designed to impress, the producer wore a simple black dress with a single strand of pearls. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone. "Sit down," Eleanor said when Maria approached, gesturing to an empty chair beside her. Her voice was warm but direct. That was quite a performance. "Thank you," Maria said, her mouth suddenly dry. She sat down carefully, trying not to look as overwhelmed as she felt. "Where did you study?" Eleanor asked, getting straight to the point. "Juilliard, but only for a semester." Maria swallowed hard. "Family problems. I have to drop out." "And you've been waiting tables since then?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Among other things, whatever pays the bills." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "And how long has it been since you played regularly?" "About 5 years," Maria admitted. The producer's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. 5 years? And you just sat down and played Chopin and Rachmaninoff like that?" Maria smiled weakly. I used to practice 8 hours a day, every day. I guess some things you don't forget. Elena studied her for a long moment, then reached into her purse and pulled out a sleek business card. She handed it to Maria. Talent like yours doesn't belong behind a serving tray, she said quietly. Call me on Monday. We should talk about your future. Maria stared at the card in her hand, hardly daring to believe it was real. Why? She asked before she could stop herself. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Eleanor's face softened slightly. Because 20 years ago, someone took a chance on me when I was nobody. And because true talent is rare, even in my world. When I find it, I don't let it slip away. She glanced around the busy restaurant. Especially not to a place where it's been hidden for 5 years already. Maria clutched the card tightly, feeling like she might wake up from a dream at any moment. Across the room, guests were looking in their direction, whispering excitedly. Her old life and her possible new future separated by a single evening and one moment of courage. The weekend passed in a blur for Maria. She kept Eleanor's business card in her pocket at all times, taking it out occasionally just to make sure it was real. Her roommate Tina couldn't believe what had happened. You're telling me Eleanor Winters? Eleanor Winters gave you her actual phone number? Tina sat cross-legged on their worn couch, eyes wide with disbelief. The woman who discovered Alex Chen and Paula Rivera. Maria nodded, still stunned herself. She told me to call her on Monday. Well, you're calling her, right? Please tell me you're calling her. Maria sighed, running her fingers over the embossed lettering on the card. I don't know. What if it was just pity? Or maybe she was caught up in the moment. People say things they don't mean all the time. Tina threw a pillow at her. Are you serious right now? The woman heard you play and recognized your talent. That's her whole job. She doesn't go around giving her card to people because she feels sorry for them. Deep down, Maria knew Tina was right. But after 5 years of pushing her dreams aside, it was hard to believe they might suddenly be within reach again. What if she called Eleanor and nothing came of it? Would she be able to go back to serving tables after having her hopes raised so high? Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a light rain. Maria had the day off from Bellini's, which meant no distractions. She sat at their tiny kitchen table, phone in one hand, Eleanor's card in the other. It took 3 attempts before she finally dialed the number. A pleasant-voiced assistant answered. Eleanor Winters' office. Hello, my name is Maria Cortez. Eleanor asked me to call her today. Her voice came out higher than usual, nerves making her sound like a teenager. Ah, yes, the pianist from Bellini's. Ms. Winters is expecting your call. Please hold. Maria almost hung up in shock. Eleanor had told her staff to expect her call. Before she could process this, another voice came on the line. Maria, I'm glad you called. Eleanor's voice was just as direct over the phone as it had been in person. I was worried you might talk yourself out of it. Maria laughed nervously. I almost did. Well, I'm glad you didn't. Listen, I've got a busy morning, so I'll get right to the point. I'd like you to come to my studio this afternoon. Play for a few of my colleagues. Nothing formal, just to get a sense of your range. Your studio? Today? Maria felt dizzy. Is that a problem? No, it's just, I haven't practiced. I mean really practiced, not in years. There was a pause on the other end. Maria, you played Rachmaninoff after a 5-year break from the piano. I think you'll be fine for an informal audition, but if you prefer to have a few days to prepare. No, Maria said quickly. Today is good. Today is perfect. Elena gave her the address and a time, 3 o'clock. The call ended, and Maria sat frozen at the kitchen table, hardly daring to breathe. This was actually happening. She was going to play for Eleanor Winters and her colleagues, professional musicians and industry people who could make or break careers with a single word. What would she wear? What would she play? She looked down at her hands, with their short nails and rough skin from years of washing dishes and carrying heavy trays. Not a pianist's hands anymore. But they had remembered how to play, hadn't they? When it mattered most, they had remembered. She spent the morning searching through her closet for something appropriate to wear. Nothing seemed right. All her nice clothes from her Juilliard days were long gone, sold to help pay medical bills. She finally settled on a simple black skirt and blue blouse she'd worn to her father's funeral. Not ideal, but the best she had. The rain had stopped by the time Maria left her apartment. She couldn't afford a taxi, so she took the bus across town to the address Eleanor had given her. It was in one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city, an area Maria had only ever passed through, never actually visited. The building was sleek and modern, with a security guard in the lobby who checked her name against a list before letting her in. The elevator whisked her up to the 12th floor, where the doors opened directly into a reception area with Winters Productions written in elegant silver letters on the wall. A young man at the front desk smiled at her. "Ms. Cortez? You're right on time. They're waiting for you in Studio B." Maria took a deep breath, straightened her skirt, and followed him down a hallway lined with framed platinum records and photographs of famous musicians. This was a world she had once dreamed of entering. Now, against all odds, she was here. The door to Studio B opened, and her future waited on the other side. 1 year later, Maria stood backstage at Bellini's, her heart racing with a different kind of nervousness than she had felt that first night at the piano. The restaurant had been transformed for the evening. The regular dining tables had been rearranged to create a proper performance space, with the grand piano as the centerpiece. A small stage had been built, and proper lighting installed. "Sold-out crowd," Eleanor said, appearing beside her. Not a single empty seat. Maria peeked through the curtain they had hung for the occasion. The faces looking back at her were a mix of familiar and strange. Regular customers of Bellini's sat alongside music critics and industry professionals. In the front row, she could see her mother, dressed in her Sunday best, clutching a tissue already. "I can't believe this is happening," Maria whispered. The past year had been a whirlwind. That first audition at Eleanor's studio had led to a scholarship to complete her education. 3 of Eleanor's colleagues had pooled their resources to create a special fund after hearing her play that day. She had returned to school, practiced until her fingers ached, and recorded her first album. A collection of classical pieces interwoven with her own compositions. Eleanor squeezed her shoulder. "Believe it, you earned every bit of this." Maria smoothed down the front of her new dress, deep blue, like the one she had worn for her last recital before her father got sick. This one wasn't second-hand or borrowed. She had bought it herself, with the advance from her recording contract. Mr. Bellini approached, looking unusually formal in a tuxedo. "Ready?" Maria nodded. When she had suggested returning to Bellini's for her first public performance since her comeback, Mr. Bellini had been moved to tears. He had closed the restaurant for 3 days to prepare for the event, treating it with the importance of a royal visit. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Bellini announced as he stepped through the curtain, "welcome to a very special evening at Bellini's." The crowd quieted as he continued. 1 year ago tonight, something magical happened in this very room. A young woman who had been serving your meals for months stepped up to this piano and showed us that sometimes extraordinary talent hides in the most unexpected places. Maria listened, remembering how differently her life had looked a year ago. The double shifts, the aching feet, the constant worry about bills. The music locked away inside her, silent for so long. Tonight, we are honored to welcome her back, not as our waitress, but as the artist she was always meant to be. Please join me in welcoming Maria Cortez. The applause was deafening as Maria stepped through the curtain. She spotted Lisa and the other servers from Bellini's standing along the wall, cheering louder than anyone. They were all wearing Team Maria buttons that Lisa had made. Maria sat at the piano, the same one where her journey had restarted a year ago. She adjusted the microphone that had been set up beside it. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "Before I begin, I'd like to invite some special people to join me." She gestured toward the side of the room where Mr. Bellini and the restaurant staff stood. "These people were my family when I needed one. They supported me when I was just the quiet waitress who kept to herself, and they're the ones who gave me the chance to become who I am today." Mr. Bellini looked surprised as Maria waved him forward. One by one, the staff of Bellini's joined her on stage, looking both embarrassed and proud. "Success means nothing if you forget where you came from," Maria said, her eyes finding her mother in the front row. "Or who helped you along the way." She turned back to the piano, placed her fingers on the keys, and took a deep breath. The piece she had chosen to play first was her own composition, titled 5 Years of Silence. She had written it during those first weeks back at school, pouring into it all the longing and loss and hope that had defined her journey. As the first notes filled the room, Maria felt a sense of completion. The circle had closed. She had left this restaurant as a waitress with a hidden talent and returned as the musician she was always meant to be. The path between those 2 points had been long and hard, but sitting here now, with music flowing from her fingers and the faces of those she loved watching her with pride, she wouldn't have changed a single step. Sometimes life's detours, she had learned, weren't detours at all, but the very path you were meant to travel all along.